All right. I am super excited for our session today. Wow, the time has come. If you all have been following me for a while, you know that I've been waiting for a time to rant about this conversation. And I'm trying to frame this not as a rant. We're definitely going to cover some honest things when it comes to what am I trying to say? Restarting my thought. We're going to be very direct when it comes to BRGs versus ERGs. The difference, if there is a difference, and maybe, not even maybe, but why I strongly feel like in the space right now, we need to get back into ERGs and how that's actually an evolution for the ERG space instead of how a lot of people view it right now, where like ERGs is looked at as like a step behind. So we're going to touch on all this today. Super excited to get started. Definitely continue to put in the chat where are you from, all the things. Definitely love seeing you. Welcome Maggie, welcome Woodrow. Thanks for joining in. Okay, so excited to get started with it. Let's just hop in. For those who don't know who I am, if you're just like, I literally don't know you at all, here's a little bit about me. She, her pronouns, all things ERGs. I literally go by the ERG homegirl on LinkedIn, here on LinkedIn, I should probably say, because I'm all things ERGs. With that, definitely big, like obsessing about ERGs. They take over my life in like the best way possible. I try to develop a lot of free resources for you all in the ERG space. So we have the ERG Movement Model, which we'll talk about today. If you don't know what it is, don't worry, you will. I've also been featured in Forbes for my work with ERGs, as well as Bloomberg, HR Brew. I get around, definitely. I have some different like hot takes when it comes to the ERG space, such as this one that we'll be discussing today. Again, a lot of great resources out there. One of my favorites to promote is the ERG Champs community, 100% free. And we're actually just now doing a community optimization process, which is a whole nother conversation. But just know our community is definitely going up a notch this year. So if you have applied, don't worry, you will get accepted into it in time, assuming that you're in the space. But we're just basically revamping the community. Long story short, something to note, something to get excited about. And that's where this recording will be available as well. So if you miss it, that's where you'll find it. And I'll just say officially, this will be the cutoff point for LinkedIn. This way, the rest of it you'll catch within the community. Okay, cool. Anyway, that was my quick promo. Long story short, like I said, I'm in the ERG space, but I'm really obsessed with ERGs, and like I mentioned, have different takes when it comes to ERGs. One of them that we're talking about today is around BRGs. I've talked about this a few times in my posts, but let me just give a little bit of context on how I view ERGs. I think what makes me different is I like to treat ERGs as a business. So I believe that running an ERG program like running a business is essentially what's going to make your lives 100 times easier. And I'm speaking from experience. I'm not speaking from hypotheticals like I see a lot in the space and like we'll talk about. So you all can see I'm not alone on this. But long story short, I'm speaking from experience when I talk about running your ERG program like a business. And there's so many different ways in which this shows up. Honestly, when it comes to the topic of BRGs in particular, it's interesting. I was speaking at a conference earlier this year, and I was like, I really hate the term BRGs. And someone on the stage with me was like, yeah, you probably shouldn't say hate. Hate is such a bad word. It's like a mean word. And like in the moment, I was just like, okay. But reflecting back on that moment, I don't know, that moment has stuck with me. I think, I really do hate the word BRG. Like I really do. It's deep within me. I actually see it as a downfall of employee resource groups. Like that's how bad it is. And before I really get in, let me just say I do go by the ERG homegirl. So I speak a little frankly. Actually, I'm going to speak very frankly in this conversation. Just know this is not directed at anyone in particular. I speak to hundreds of ERG leaders, ERG program managers, a month even. So I know some people might be like, Macey, we just talked about BRGs. I feel like you're talking or like this is shots at me. I promise you it's not. That's just because I hear it so often in the space. I'm seeing a huge problem with BRGs in particular. And we're going to talk about it. All right, let me get into it. Let me stop with the pre-rant. This is the common model that I see in the ERG space here. Affinity group to ERG to BRG. I'm sure a lot of you all here have seen it. I'm not going to ask you to put in the chat what your program does. But I've seen a range of these. Also, I'm going to move my face out of the model before. Long story short, I'm not going to go into it, but I'm sure you've seen this before. Essentially, the thing that I mentioned just now is that the only major difference oftentimes between employee resource group and business resource group is down here, this like focus, where I know oftentimes we say that ideally a business resource group has community building and this added impact, like this added focus on business impact. But what I've seen oftentimes is that it replaces it entirely, where like the new focus is business impact instead of community building at all. You all might have seen this yourselves. Okay, that's basically what I was just saying within that mini rant there. This is, oh, and I think I was also saying, I'll just give some context. When I first got into the ERG space, this was what was wildly popular at the time, essentially. And honestly, that's why it spread so quickly, just like ERG spread so quickly. Like a lot of these companies, honestly, thousands of companies launched their ERG programs between 2020 and 2022. And even then, how they launched these programs oftentimes was just looking at what was on the internet and just taking that. And this was a thing that was on the internet that everyone took and ran with and said, this must be the best practice here. And that is unfortunately the problem that we're trying to solve for today. Okay, long story short, sorry about that again. Now getting into it from here. I am almost alone in this train of thought of saying business resource groups is not the move. Like you really don't hear a lot of people talking about this. Why is that? Why don't a lot of people talk about business resource groups essentially and the problem with it? This is where I was also saying I go by the ERG homegirl, so hopefully no one feels attacked with what I'm going to say. I think that I also probably said that during that rant part. So I promise this is not anyone in particular I'm speaking at. I just have these conversations all the time with hundreds of people. And I think it's time that we have this conversation essentially. Okay, now all that being said, question that I was just saying, why do people move to BRG if it's such a problem? And what is the problem? We're going to discuss both of those things today. Actually, I have a list of reasons. I love having a list that we go through, and we are just going to go through them one by one, essentially, with what are the common reasons why people stick to BRGs or move to BRGs. All right, there we go. We'll just stick with that part. So, all that being said, the first reason here, BRGs are the industry standard. This is what I hear very, very commonly. And like I was saying, around 2020, I would definitely give it that it was the industry standard, that this was expected. Like I remember hearing people say ERG to BRG or affinity group to ERG to BRG model. I would hear it a lot. And I will say, I think it would be safe to say that I've never publicly said anything positive really about BRGs. Like even during that wave, that felt wrong from the beginning. As an ERG leader, even when I was a leader, to say, okay, business resource group is supposed to be the next stage of this, that's supposed to be better than what we're doing here. It never made sense. So I never co-signed that, is at least from what I know. I don't know. Sometimes people say things, but I don't ever remember co-signing the concept of BRGs. Even then, I tried to do research on the term BRG to see like where did it first start. I think I've pinpointed it. I think I actually have. I'm not going to say it here because I'm still doing research, but I will say so far I've gone as far back to 2011 when the term started showing up is what I've seen so far. Now, with that, I will say, just as a side note, like the lack of clear origin, like the fact that it's not clear who came up with this concept around BRGs, it's part of the problem. Because, like, again, I mean, I want to say no shade, but I don't know. Because at this point, who am I shading? But I feel like whomever is speaking about this is the better version of ERGs should probably have, like, successfully taken a company through this without having a lot of the side effects that we see today, the burnout, the low engagement, all the things. And definitely in 2011, where ERGs weren't even that largely popular, you can't even say that that was done. So, long story short, this concept has been around for a while. Don't really know where it came from, which is part of the problem here. Even then, another thing, I'm not a fan of everything that I see on the internet about ERGs. You might have also heard me say in general, don't believe everything you see on the internet because so much of it is honestly just made up. And sometimes no shade, but a lot of these folks, whether they're like journalists or whomever that might be talking about ERGs, they quote these things as facts, even though they're largely just opinions, and even opinions from people who've never program managed an ERG. So that feels also kind of problematic to me. This is one of the examples of don't believe everything that you see on the internet about ERGs. Actually, comment in the chat right now. Comment a one if you already know what I'm about to say about this statistic, and comment a two if you don't. It's okay if you don't. I'm just curious, honestly, who we have here. Like, have you all been around long enough for me to do my rant on this, or is this completely new to you? What I might say about 90% of Fortune 500 companies having ERGs. I know that this live is a little bit delayed, so I'll wait to see the comments come in. I'm curious who we have in the room here. Do we have some OGs, or do we have um, some people who are newer to me and my content? Okay, I see it too. All right, so with that, we're going to dive into this really briefly, but I just want to make it, I want you all to be on the same page as me when I say why you shouldn't believe everything you see online about ERGs. If you were to look up right now this statistic, you will see dozens and dozens of responses. Actually, you'll see at least 12 Google pages worth of this exact statistic. It is being quoted even to this day as a fact. Like I part of me, if I wasn't afraid of me doing something not great tech wise again, I would just look it up for you now. Actually, I don't know. Maybe I can get a little brave, get a little fancy. I'm gonna look it up here with you because I want us to be on the same page because I know it's hard to fight this industry standard thing. So if right now I were to say, actually, we'll do like 90% of Fortune, can't type today, companies have ERGs. All right, even the AI says yes. Okay, anyway, I'm not even going to address that. Scrolling to the bottom here, you'll see at least 10 pages. I'm pretty sure it goes beyond that. So, this is a largely quoted statistic, long story short. And this is, we'll go back to why some of the wording here is wild. Today in the US, 90%. Okay, that is a wild statement based on what I'll show you all. Okay, you can see across these different years too, we still see this. This was 3 years ago. Someone posted that. This was in 2021, roughly 90%. 2023, we're still saying today they're a fixture at 90%. I still get the statistic in my inbox because I have Google alerts for it. Not in 2017, 90%. It can't be 90% all these years. And you all will see how it was 90% none of these years. But long story short, I still get this statistic to this day in my inbox, and it is made up. Okay. Don't believe me? Don't worry. I actually did a whole series on this last year. As a matter of fact, I did more than a series. I did a study because that statistic also never really made sense to me and never added up. See, and this is why I was afraid to what was I about to say? To switch where I'm sharing to, because now it won't share back. Okay, there we go. Cool. So with that, you can go on the ERG Movement's YouTube channel and you can see this study that I did. Essentially, more than the study, you can see my rants. Actually, I will just give you all a piece. I just want you all to hear a piece of me going down the rabbit hole to figure out where did this number come from. Because again, there's no way that that could be quoted in 24 saying today, in 2024, saying that today 90% of Fortune 500 companies have ERGs, and also quoted in 2017, right? So let's just skip. This is a throwback video, but this, here we go. Let's try it here. Okay, we'll get into it. So now I'm like, okay, this is interesting. I didn't. I feel like if we're using, okay, I'm just going to go back. So long story short with this, I'm diving down the rabbit hole of where this metric came from. This actually is about like a 20-minute rant, and I'm not going to play it all, but I just want you all to see a piece. Actually, let's start at this one. Thank you to, if you do try to find it, is called Taking Employee Resource Groups to the Next Level. For those of you who are listening audio, again, you can play this back later and do it live, or you can just search in your own time and you'll see all the same things. But this is the report it's going to take you to. So taking ERGs to the next level. This article is from 2016, to be clear, which makes sense. The first one, the Forbes one, was in 2017. It's referencing something that was written in 2016 now. So we're going even further back, even less relevant to where the current state of things, which is nothing. Corporations in 2016, not the same as 2023 at all. But I digress. Now, going into this article, I am like, okay, cool. Let's see. Like, where are they get it? Did they do a study? Is that how they came up with it? No. I go here and they actually have another reference. So this is just in their like quick fact sheet. Basically, it says approximately 90% of Fortune 500 companies have ERG, and they reference to a different article. Do you all see where I'm going here? Like, okay, we'll get into it. So now I'm like, okay, this is interesting. I feel like if we're using this statistic as frequently as we are, it would be more readily available on like, where are the facts behind it? Like, I'm like, okay, I'm literally sitting over here cracking up as I watch this, just because I remember how frustrated I was at this at the time. Long story short, spoiler alert, you're definitely feel free to watch it, episode 18 of the ERG Movement podcast. But what you will find is that all that, the furthest back, I found that number to be 2007. 2007, where that was first quoted. And it's still being quoted today as a fact. So I just want us to know, not even like most of the stuff, I just cannot emphasize enough that I see on the internet about ERGs is not a fact. It's not a best practice. And that is part of why I started the ERG movement, because I was just like, we have to do ERGs better. Like, we are discrediting ourselves. We're setting ourselves up for failure here. And this could be such an impactful program. We can do so much better if we just pivot a little bit. So last year, this was like one of my big moments. I think this year, my Roman Empire, I don't know if you all have seen that trend, but like my current focus that I'm like honing in on is this whole BRG thing. Okay. So just so you all know, like I said, ERGs, really, when it comes to industry standard, who cares? Industry standard. Long story short, if we're talking about what other things is industry standard, yeah, bad data, as we can see, also industry standard right now for ERGs. ERG leader burnout, that's also industry standard. Low engagement, very popular right now in the industry. A lot of journalists who are not in the ERG space, not an ERG program manager. Some of them never even been a lead, making thought pieces on ERGs. General disorganization, that's all also technically industry standard. So would I default to the industry standard? Long story short, no. Even then, another plug to the champs community, we also have this form that people fill out where they say what their pain points are. All these things also industry standard. Even then, right now, I will say the actual fact, when I did a study last year of how many Fortune 500 companies have ERGs, 79.6%, which really comes out to about 300. Actually, I think it's actually 79.4. Ironically, with me talking about numbers, I typed the wrong one. But nevertheless, 79.4%, 397 companies. I was trying to do this off the top of my head with the slide, so bear with me, okay? 397 companies had, of the Fortune 500 companies had ERGs. Now, when you think of the concept BRG, okay, going back into the topic, what's the percentage of the companies that of this 397 that we think call their programs BRGs? Or even just how many of, just put a number in the chat. How many do we think had called their ERG programs BRGs as of June of 2023? I'll give you all a second. But the spoiler alert answer, only 16%. 16.6%, which is roughly 17% when rounded up. Only 66 of those companies called themselves BRGs. So industry standard again, no, not even in the Fortune 500s. More than half of them called themselves ERGs, just to be clear. All right, well, what about the Fortune 100s? Did we see a big difference? 17%, so it went up 0.4%. 28 of the Fortune 100 companies with ERGs call themselves BRGs. Okay. Still, the overwhelming majority called themselves ERGs. Even then, the name is largely just semantics. Honestly, I would say, truly, who cares about the name? Like, if you call yourself a BRG just because you need a different title, fine. But it's the principle behind the BRG. That's the thing I have a problem with. Even then, look here. The second largest chunk here is miscellaneous names. Would you all believe that when I did this study, since we have some people in the chat who clearly you all haven't seen it yet, so don't worry, go to the ERGmovement.com. You'll be able to access the study that I did. And fun fact, in Champs next year, I'm actually going to release the list only for our community members, so you all can fact check me here. But anyway, for all the companies, so for the Fortune 500, the 397 companies with ERGs, we found over 60 distinct names for ERG programs. 60 is wild. That means between ERGs, BRGs, employee networks, team member engagement networks, engagement affinity spaces, affinity networks, there were over 60 different versions of that. So part of it, I'll say BRGs are just a name. Okay, we will just acknowledge that part, as you all can see here. That was just so wild to me. Now, well, let's be honest. We both know that when we talk about ERGs, BRGs, that you all are talking about more than just the name. You are saying, no, we need to infuse business impact into our programs. So with that, let's discuss that, because we have already debunked the idea of it being industry standard. Well, industry is not the best thing to follow right now. There's a lot of bad practices in the industry, and not to mention a lot on the internet, not the most reliable about ERGs. Especially, my big thing is I just don't feel comfortable taking advice from people who've never successfully run an ERG program. Okay, so I'm just not a shady thing, just putting that out there, because that's where I see a lot of this random numbers and best practices coming from. Okay, cool. Next reason why people don't or why they move to BRGs. Well, there's a thought that BRGs are more impactful ERGs, even going back to that original development model that we were looking at. That is a thought that the next phase of an ERG, which focuses on community building, would be an ERG that focuses on business impact. And as I mentioned before, it's still so problematic, the fact that like we're almost replacing community with business oftentimes with these BRGs. Okay, well, let's play along with this train of thought that BRGs are more advanced. So that would assume that a better ERG, one that focuses on engaging employees from underrepresented groups, is one that actually makes people from these underrepresented groups do free labor for the company instead of hiring actual specialists, professionals, and consultants. Or essentially, what I like to call having a commoditized ERG. One where now we're turning this engagement-driven, passionate work that people are interested in into something more transactional. Okay, maybe you all say that's not fair, which, okay, I will just say that's just what I see it as. That's really what it is when we're forcing this business into it. Even then, the thought right now is that ERGs ultimately don't have enough business impact. It's assuming that ERGs enough is not business impact. When it's so interesting, because ERG in the name alone, it implies what business impact we're trying to shoot for. Community. And unfortunately, I also hear from folks all the time, community isn't enough. The business is asking for more. We'll touch on this in a second. I will say right now, the business, hot take, Just hear me out, okay? Hear out my train of thought. I hope you are able to make it for the whole thing because I know some people have to hop at the hour. I tried something new with this 12:30 thing. But anyway, oftentimes the business isn't asking for more in terms of business impact. They're just asking for clearer understanding of what you're doing. And our translation of that typically as even as program managers means, oh, we have to make clearer the connection between the ERG and revenue production, when that is so far from true, so far from true. Right now, long story short, we'll touch on that in a second, but more right now, what I see in the space would essentially be undefined business impact. So oftentimes this might show up as a commerce or a, what's another one that I've seen? Marketplace pillar. Typically a couple of ERG leaders, sometimes one ERG leader per ERG, who just has to figure out what does it mean to make business impact for this ERG, which is kind of wild to me. But like the fact that it's even undefined is so problematic, because then where are the parameters? How do they get these things done? Oftentimes, this conversation, like most of my conversations, really for the ERG program manager, whomever is over the program, you have to be the person to bake out all the details. If you really want an ERG to collaborate with the business, which we'll talk about why that's so not the way, but if you really want that, it's on you to first define everything that is involved in that. What are the parameters? How do they do it? Who do they reach out to? All the things. But because oftentimes it is just left to this commerce pillar person who takes on all the load then to figure out what does it mean to impact the business when it comes to this community. Well, it's no wonder why I get so many people who lead a commerce pillar reaching out to me directly and saying, yes, I hate my role. That's not what I got into this space for, essentially. I get it so often. Okay, what else is more that I see in the space when we think about business impact? Well, we just talked about this part. No parameters on scope, which in addition to what I just mentioned, now you're overstepping. You're doing part of what an actual business unit is supposed to do. And now that's causing some tensions with those business units. Now it's leading to disappointment with the ERG leads when they do champion an initiative that they think is in line with this business impact, but the business never actually does it, which I see that often as well. I've seen an ERG literally create a product like end to end, ready to have it out there, and the business just never did anything with it. And it would have been a beautiful product. It would have made sense for the business, but that's not what the business wanted. So that leads to a lot of disappointment, frustration with leads, and overall burnout. Because ultimately, again, people get into this work and they're cool with volunteering for the community part out of passion. When you start to add on this more that is undefined, by the way, that can lead to additional burnout. Not even just that, but like we mentioned, because of the overstepping, there's also a lot of tensions with the business units that I see. And when we go to measure the impact of our work, we are stuck scrambling for these metrics that sometimes I've seen truly pulled out of thin air in terms of what this ERG has done. Let's give some examples, some real life examples. All of these, by the way, I've actually seen for companies that either call themselves BRGs or are trying to infuse more, quote, business impact. And what essentially happens with that. This was one company I worked with where the ERG worked with the product marketing team. Actually, the product marketing team came to them. So the product marketing team came to them and said, hey, we want your opinion on this product as it relates to your community. The ERG gave its feedback on the product. And essentially, they wanted the marketing team to pivot on the product. They said, I kind of like this better. The marketing team said, oh, okay. This is what the community said, so this is what we're going to go with. The campaign, the product campaign for this new product flopped completely. And go figure, the marketing team had who to blame as a result? Not themselves. Wow. I'm not sure. Oh yeah. Okay. I was just about to say, am I not sharing my screen? Okay, perfect. Okay, back to what I was saying. Not themselves, but ultimately they blame the ERG. And here's the thing. A couple of things with it, and we'll talk about why ERGs don't serve as actual consultants, like why they're not consultants. But ultimately, when ERGs give their opinion on things, they're just speaking from their personal opinion. Like that's just their personal preference, which oftentimes, ironically, is loaded with bias towards what they're interested in, their takes on things. So ultimately, probably not the best people to go to consult for, especially external facing things. Okay. We're going to talk through all these things, but especially external facing things, ERGs are not the go to for this. So, overall, in this situation, the ERG kind of holds the burden of this failed initiative. And now, actually, if you were to talk about the ROI of the ERG, in this case, it's a negative ROI because lost money, wasted money. Now the ERG program has less credibility. Okay, another example. ERG has a really cool idea for the business impact. It's going to be great. I can't even go into details because I don't want it to be. Some of these might feel a little fresh, but anyway, they have this great idea, and they do it and they think, oh, this is not going to be a problem. The company supports our community, so there should be no problem with us doing this. And I'll just say, I won't give details on who or what it was, but I'll say it was something where I could see an ERG leader saying, this is no big deal because the company supports our community. Well, long story short, it actually was a big deal and really put the company into some serious public backlash risk. So now there's some internal friction between the leads. Leads sometimes get their hands smacked a little bit because they're doing things that put the company at legal exposure. Sometimes I've even seen in a separate situation an ERG leader be put immediately on a final warning performance plan, or not even a performance plan, but whatever you call like that final written warning because of overstepping when truly they just didn't know. They didn't think it was a big deal. There was nothing written out for them. Okay, this is all with the results of trying to push for business impact. Another one, misaligned representation goals. What do I mean here? Well, this was one, and actually this is one I see often at a lot of companies. The ERG says, well, to impact the business, we're going to increase representation for our community. Well, here's the thing. The recruiting teams oftentimes are not really trying to do things that are specifically focused towards their communities, especially with the climate right now. Essentially, there's no quotas essentially that are being pushed often at a lot of companies around diversity recruiting. So really that just leaves the leads feeling frustrated, saying, wow, so we want more, representation. That's the business impact that we chose that matters to our community, and we can't even do it because the teams aren't able to support us right now or have no interest in supporting us. Leads to huge disappointment. Another one I see very common, performative collaboration, where maybe the team does reach out to the ERG, but really only at the final stages of something just to get their approval or their feedback. And oftentimes this feels very performative for ERG leads, where it's like, why are you even reaching out to me? This is what you planned on doing anyway. And oftentimes the channels in which that reach out happens also has low engagement. So people aren't oftentimes responding to the marketing channel or whomever it might be. Well, I see this a lot too. These are all things that come with just this confusion around business impact. I cannot emphasize it enough. Don't worry, more coming still, but this is also where I'm seeing right now. These are all things that I'm seeing in the space right now. I'm talking a lot. Put a 1 in the chat if you're still following with what I'm saying, if this is making sense so far. Sometimes I feel like I'm talking to myself just because of like the delay with LinkedIn. Okay, going into this, what we were saying that the thought is a BRG is an evolved ERG. Well, here's another part of this. So we're talking one about how this evolution is essentially, and I'm quoting, I know you all can't see that, but how this evolution essentially is not even defined in what we're trying to do. And even then, because it's not properly baked out, it's leading to a lot of negative things. Beyond that, I will say that this evolution is also missing the basics, the very minimum basics of an ERG. I mean, if you're saying that you're taking it up a notch from an ERG, that means hypothetically you should have at least the basics, the foundation of a strong ERG. That's also where a lot of companies are struggling. High level, I talk about this a lot, but I know we have some newbies on here. Shouts out to you all. I am just going to explain what this strong foundation of a ERG is. And this also oftentimes comes from ERGs being viewed as super grassroots. So we say we don't need a strong foundation. It's just grassroots. No, you do, because that's why we're dealing with all these pain points right now. So foundations, 3 P's of ERGs. This is essentially a framework that I took from the business world because, like I said, I believe ERG should run like a business. Purpose, process, programming. Quick overview of each of them and how they show up in uh, essentially setting up an ERG for success. And these are meant to go in order. Okay. Thing one, purpose, getting clarity on why your program exists. This is both understanding what is the employee need for ERGs, and also when we talk about business, because spoiler alert, I'll say this later in the presentation, but when I say go back to ERGs, I'm not saying take out business impact. I'm just saying to focus on the right business impact. Where right now we are that is already embedded in ERGs. You don't need additional fake business, not even fake, probably not the best word. We don't need additional added business impacts that aren't baked out. That's essentially what I'm trying to say. So going back to it, purpose is getting clarity on why this program is here. This means really more than anything, talking to your executives and saying, why do you think this program exists? What is the purpose in your opinion? Most of the executives, I will just give you a spoiler alert. They are going to tell you they feel like this is an employee program. That is what most executives think this program exists for. It's only us in the space that are trying to say, oh, we can also impact business goals without being the one who wants to actually do the work to bake out what does it look like to impact business goals from a revenue production standpoint. Nevertheless, getting clear on your program purpose, that is step one. Step two, process, that's understanding how the individual leads are supposed to do their roles, having SOPs. I like to say if I was to go and volunteer at a food bank, they're not just going to tell me to go do, they're going to tell me what to do, how to do it, step by step. Right now, that oftentimes doesn't exist within an ERG. Even the playbooks that I often see are very, very short, like 10 pages or something, or sometimes significantly less. It's not enough for leads. These are volunteers who just want to show up and be able to support their community. So we need to bake it out. That's our responsibility as a person who owns the program, to bake it out. What does it mean, essentially, to do each role? What are the roles that need to exist, and standardizing that across the program. So what the program is, how the leads are supposed to do it. Programming is essentially talking about the results of the ERG program, the product of the ERG program in the business world. That's what it would be called. That's essentially the initiatives and the events that are, events and initiatives is why initiatives is more than just live events, but the things that the leads and the ERG does to engage its members and essentially drive impact. Okay, programming. Here's the problem with most companies now is that we skip these first two entirely. We never actually got clear with why we're launching this ERG program, and we never got clear with the process, having a clear playbook, and that's why there's so much burnout. Most companies, when they launch their ERG program, calling themselves grassroots, they just jumped into, hey, what's our first event going to be? What are we posting? What's the business impact? Also, that's another one I saw. Sometimes companies straight out the gate will jump into that without having any of this stuff here. And that's why it's so interesting to me that even companies that have had ERGs for some time that still don't have these two things here, they just try to further programming. So it's like we're jumping ahead. Actually, we still have a mess of a program. And I say often, you don't scale mess. You're definitely not supposed to scale mess, but that's what's happening right now with BRGs. We don't even have our basics together in terms of a strong ERG. We don't have a strong community. Matter of fact, going into those pain points again, we still have all these pain points. And we're talking about, oh, we need to do better programming. We need to do things that are now impacting the business. We need to take it up a notch. Taking it up a notch is not, we need to do more for the business. We need to increase our partnerships. That's not more. Right now, more in the ERG space is getting your program together. It's fixing those first two P's. That is more right now. That is a lift enough. Getting your program on track for success. This way you can have better results. You can have more engagement, essentially, or you can get closer to your goals. We're not even going to get into all that today. But ultimately, when you are on track for success, that's when you can start thinking about scaling your program, which even then, business impact shows up in a few different ways, but I don't always encourage it be in the consulting matter that we'll talk about. Running through it, yes, quick plug. I do actually have a program, ERG Fresh Start program, where we do this. We do this for you. We take you through the 3 Ps. So quick ad break, just putting it out there. If you want your program mission defined, you really want real clarity around your purpose, you want a full SOP baked out for you, full thing, and training for your leads in less than 90 days. That's our program. So just a plug there. More information on our website. All right. Going into additional things. Ad break is done. Going into that, beyond just ERG or BRG, we talked about how regardless there's still burnout that exists. I will just say right now, it's so interesting to me that we're not understanding this fact. This is important. When we treat ERG leaders as mini DI consultants, we're setting up the program for failure. And that's one of the major problems that I have essentially with the BRG space, where essentially oftentimes business impact is defined as internal consulting or external consulting. So saying how we're really working together with the business to make this a better place internally for folks, or working with the business to do more external facing things. Both of those are matters of consultants, but there's 2 levels to them. I definitely want to say, and I'll show you this shortly, the external piece, that's the big no-no right now. Like, I strongly discourage against that. Internal, it's doable, but there's still some cautions that go with it. But let's just clarify really quick, rapid fire, how ERGs are not consultants. Consultants, DI consultants, they're professionals in the space. So when you get a marketing consultant, that means that they understand marketing. They understand your customer. That's important because maybe your customer, when you think about it, ERG leaders, we're passionate about the communities we support. So when we make recommendations, we're going to recommend the most extreme thing. We're going to say, oh, you want to support women? These are all the things you should do. And we're going to champion it to the max. We're not, oftentimes, ERG leaders, because they're passionate, they're not just going to recommend the next baby step or one little thing. They're going to say the thing, even if it doesn't make sense based on who the customer is, because they're like, well, this is the right thing to do. And that's probably true. But even then, a consultant is going to help match, hey, what's the right thing to do and where's the business at right now, and give you the best recommendations and help you to execute it. ERGs are not that person because they likely don't understand these units that they're consulting with. They're ill-positioned there. Lots of legal liability. If it flops, who's that on? If there's public backlash, which right now, if you're also subscribed to our newsletter, we've been talking about this. A lot of the public backlash right now, companies are blaming their ERG programs for it. How wild is that? Where it's like, oh, I thought that you all wanted this business impact. No, that's what I'm trying to say. Companies, they really don't. Actually, especially if they know that there's some legal liability assigned to it. We talk about this too. Classification discrepancies, employment law issues, discrimination liability. There's more. I just feel like I was rambling so much in the beginning. I'm not even able to get to all the things now, but we're gonna push through with them. Feel free to reach out to me too, because I'm happy to rant on this together. Bias in decision making. That's also, there's some legal things around that as well when it comes to ERGs consulting, especially for external things. Collective bargaining. U word is union. Yeah, we're getting kind of close in the ERG space. Very excited to share some of the conversations I've been having with some lawyers, with some union people, to say like, oh, wow, ERGs they're kind of getting in danger as we're talking about this business impact thing. Yeah, it is a problem. So I know some people say, well, we still need business impact. Well, here's the thing. You would have business impact if you had that strong program foundation. If you just clarified from the jump, which I would just say the preferred program purpose, the one that I wish that we were all on the same page with, is community, employee engagement for niche groups. That should be your purpose. Employee engagement, learning and development, social impact for niche groups. Like when I say social impact, I mean like give back initiatives, community service. That is the ROI of ERGs, like period, point blank. In a way that employee engagement, they're for all employees, but this is a specific, smaller niche community, which means that the engagement is more concentrated. That is really all this is. ERGs, ironically, are not even ironically, point blank, they're a cost center. We have to stop trying to twist them into this revenue producing volunteer program, which honestly almost makes no sense at all. It's not a bad thing that ERGs are a cost center. But I will say, trying to turn this cost center into a revenue producing space, yeah, our executives are going to say, sure, when they hear it. But when we're not executing on it, when we're not baking things out, when it's opening us up to a lot of legal liability, like all these things, that's not the answer. And that's where we're at now, especially when we haven't even baked out the beginning parts. So as we think about this mistaken ERG model, this is the same thing that I showed before, essentially, but just in a different way. Feel free to screenshot because I'm having to run through the second half of this presentation is just more rushed. It's, if you all have been here before, you just know the presentation style right now. But nevertheless, ERGs, we like that. Employee engagement, learning and development, give back with a little bit of internal insight. So let's just say HR wants to know what's the sentiment of the community at the company. Yes, the ERG can provide that. This is a safe space for ERGs. That no one is, even then when we're talking about the backlash on DEI, no one is fighting this. I like truly, like this is not the thing that is frustrating to people who are pushing back on ERGs. And it's not even a whole lot of people yet, but it will be as we go further into the red. Okay. Internal business impact. Okay. Well, we're starting to do a little bit of internal consulting. How can we make this a better place internally? That's fair, but just know there still has to be parameters. It still has to be clear on how ERGs are to do this. And we don't want to remove the community building piece if we are here. This is where we start to get into the red, okay? When we're talking about external business impact, there's some major issues here. I might have to skip ahead to them, but there's some major issues here, long story short, okay? Especially being that now we're starting to treat these ERGs as revenue production, like saying that that is the win. That is not the win for ERGs. And of course, like I said, a lot of BRGs right now, they don't even focus on the community part, X'd out completely. They just focus on this business impact. Totally, we lost the mission, okay? High level, I was going to do a whole thing around this, but just know community is more than enough. Community is a strong business strategy right now. There's a lot of companies right now that are using community, and actually for years that have been using the community behind it to say, this is how we stand apart from our competitors because we have such a strong community. Even then, I'm not going to play it now, but there's this video I was going to show you all how companies right now are literally even leveraging community to a point where they're trying to create these super fans of customers, essentially. People who are so in love with their product that are part of their community first. And they're using that essentially to help build their businesses. Community right now is a super business strategy. People who are in your community, eventually, ideally, they turn into super fans. Eventually, that means more sales. And that is tied to the super fan pyramid. I talked about this before. Like I said, happy to offline. In the same way, the customer for you all, remember ERGs like a business, the customer for ERGs is employees. Please do not forget this, okay? And obviously with employees, well, if we're trying to build super fans, we're trying to build people who promote the company, who want to stay at their job, who do better work at their job, who go above and beyond, or even when you think about some of the ROI of the employee engagement teams, how this would show up. This is how it would show up for people who are super fans of their company, essentially. And so when we say, well, we still need numbers though, these are the numbers, like it already exists within our employee engagement team's numbers, within our L&D talent development team's numbers. They have numbers they're accountable to. Why are we not using those? Why are we trying to impact the business, quote unquote, and do this bigger thing, which again is opening us up to a lot of burnout, confusion, liability, all the things essentially, okay? I just mentioned this, ERGs, they're kind of scaling employee engagement, L&D, social impact. We don't have to recreate the wheel. We can tap into their metrics. When it comes to the ERG pulling its weight, I actually also did a newsletter on that. So definitely check that out. Feel free to screenshot this because I definitely just want to get to the last 2 slides at this point. I know I've done a lot of rambling. I just get into this topic. But with that, I will say moving back to ERGs is the next evolution. This is important. Going from BRG to ERG does not mean removing business impact. It's just focusing on the right customer. Our customer of our ERG is not the business. It is our employees. The business is like a board of directors. They just give us kind of like feedback, advice, but they're not the customers of our business, of our ERG. I just want you all to resonate with that. If you take nothing else away from today, please have this pivot of an understanding. And that is why so many people are struggling with coming up with or finding volunteer leads and things like that right now. Even then, that would essentially make BRGs the only employee benefit that's asked to be a revenue producer, done entirely by volunteers, by the way. It literally doesn't make any sense. I'll also just say members, they join ERG communities for community. This was a screenshot from the recent ERG conference I went to. Community, number one thing here. And I'll just say that's very common. People want to be part of community. They don't want to be part of this larger business impact. And we're the ones doing it. Us leading the program, we are the ones that have actually misguided our ERG program. And it's okay as long as we do better moving forward, essentially. Our executives are looking at us as the experts to tell them which way to go. We can tell them, hey, actually our program is for this. These are the metrics that we can move. If we really serve as that expert, the business will trust us. I've done it for so many companies where I have repositioned them to see the benefits in ERGs for what they are. We have to course correct. And I will just have, these are additional reasons why people move to BRGs. We don't have time to go through them. But I will say when I share these slides, you will be able to go through these 3 ways to persuade people, essentially, if you need it, on why not to be a BRG. Ethos, pathos, logos, something I remember learning in English class. Ethos really around like ethics, credibility. What are some reasons to not become an ERG? If these up here do not scare you enough, I mean, that's pretty much all I can do is to share this right here. This should scare you all. By the way, I'm not using it as a scare tactic, but maybe we don't know that this is all what comes with BRGs. And unfortunately, like I said, we don't have time to go through them all. Pathos, emotional reasons why not to become a BRG. I mean, exploitation of goodwill, I have on this twice because that's almost what it's doing. We're taking these volunteers who are interested and passionate, and we're kind of forcing them to give back. We're using their passion, and we are truly exploiting it, which I know none of us want to do. We care about people in the ERG space. So the fact that we're adding all this comes with BRG. It also comes with, oftentimes, let me just say, it also comes with not having those first 2 P's in place. So even if you're not a BRG and you're experiencing these things, well, you should do that as well. But even then, oftentimes BRGs, because they don't have those 2 P's in place, it also adds these things here. Logos, logically, what is it? What are the reasons why? Well, I also have these here. I just want you all to reflect on these. Like I said, happy to expand. Feel free. My inbox is open. One of them that I will bring out here, opinion-based versus customer first. That's very important. As ERG leaders, oftentimes, like I said, they give their business impact feedback based on their opinion, not necessarily based on them as a professional in the space, because oftentimes they're not a professional in the space that they're trying to bring business impact to. This was a lot. Hopefully this was helpful. Like I said, I wish I could do a little bit more rambling. An hour goes by quickly. But as mentioned as well, my inbox is open. One other thing that I will mention as we close here. I'm not trying to just take away a framework from you, because naturally you might say, well, I don't understand what is the next level of our ERG after we have those first 2 P's. Okay. That's why I have the ERG movement model. Spoiler alert, this also exists for free. I'm really trying to help the ERG space because eventually the path that we're going down, they're not going to exist. They are open to so much legal liability right now. It actually scares me in part to do this on LinkedIn Live for all people, ERG or not pro ERG, to see. But ultimately, that's why I have this model to really bake out what does it look like to have niche employee engagement at various stages of development. I will just say, like every year, this model gets better. I'm adding to it. Nothing is changing. The basics are still there, but I'm trying to make it easier and easier for you all to be able to take this model and implement it. Even then, if you want a high level, quick version of what this looks like, it's here. Feel free to screenshot. Like I said, I don't even think that this slide has been publicly made available yet. Hopefully, this session was useful. I know it's been a lot of rambling, but I just wanted to get clarity. Again, do not believe everything that you read on the internet about ERGs, but hopefully you all will be able to take this away as something to think on. So that's all I have for today. Thanks for catching me again. I will see you all next month. Next month's topic, fun fact, we're actually going to be talking about how to move your ERG from private to public. So, how to move your ERG from a space essentially where it's only accepting people who are part of the identifying affinity to a space where everyone, including allies, can join. The reason why we're talking about that is because it is illegal to do otherwise. And that is another practice that I'm seeing in the ERG space. I've seen a few, what do you call that? ERG softwares promote that. I've seen consultants promote that. It is just baffling to me. I have been saying this for the past year, but I can confirm to this day, because I've been having these conversations with lawyers recently, don't worry, you all will get the scoop. It is illegal to keep people who don't identify with your ERG out of your ERG. So that's what we're going to be talking about next month. Hopefully this was helpful. I'm seeing a few thank yous. Thank you all for being in the chat. Aaron, Eva, Tiffany, shouts out to you all and all the other people in the chat too. You all I saw your comments first. And like I said, I'll see you all next month, and join the ERG Champs community if you want the full recording. I don't know, I might leave it on LinkedIn, but like I said, this information, do I want anyone to be able to see it? Not really. So you might just have to be part of the community to get the details. All right, I'll catch you all on the next one. Like I said, my DMs are open. See you next time.